because one falls on Thanksgiving. So we'll probably give the final to you guys, not next week, but the week after. So just a reminder, if you haven't met 5 people in the class, please do so that when I give you the final, you're not freaking out about that. Got some more thoughts in the emails about that last semester. And yeah, so today we have Bill Inman. Bill is the founder of several companies, including PeopleLoop, which is innovating a new model for the contingent workforce. His accomplishments include 20 years of experience growing companies from the ground floor, just like how Daniela was talking about. And yeah, he has a lot of experience starting companies, and we're really excited to have him today. So if you can welcome him to class.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Bill Inman, and happy to be here with you and share the entrepreneurial journey that I have had. Thanks to Mackenzie for inviting me. Appreciate it. I met Mackenzie through my daughter Alexia, who is Mackenzie's beach volleyball teammate, who's here as well. So, although I've spoken in front of thousands of people at conferences at one time, I get a new level of pressure. I've never spoken with my daughter in the room, so I'm going to be subject to her critical eye. And then on top of that, several of her teammates are here as well, so if I mess this up, I'm sure in practice that's a good opportunity to jab her often. And her coach, Derek Olson, is here as well. So, right? And so if I mess it up, maybe her playtime gets affected. So it's a lot of pressure. So I have to bring my A game, and we'll do that. So, before I get started and kind of go into my experience, and I'm going to share some slides with you, and happy to make this interactive. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I just want to, by show of hands, understand: has anybody started a business before? Anyone? You have?
Yeah.
Kind of when? You kind of started one? What did you start?
It was an e-commerce website.
Okay, what's your name?
Jack.
Jack, okay. Still going?
No, I sold it, yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good result. Is anybody here definitely going to start a business in the future? Several? Do you know what kind of business you guys want to start?
Probably like a software.
Software?
Yeah.
Do you know the niche or the industry yet?
No.
Okay, that's all right. There's so much opportunity out there. And then, is everybody else here more or less because they're interested in the subject? Is that why? What are you interested in? Yeah, I'm calling you now.
Yeah, I'm interested in social entrepreneurship. So business
Social.
that helps the cause.
Okay, that's a great one to do. So, I loved my experience. I still love my experience as an entrepreneur. I am 45.99 years old today, because tomorrow's my birthday. I turned 46. So, the past 20 years, really ever since I graduated, I've been an entrepreneur for the most part. Here and there I was on W-2 a little bit, but not much. So I'm really excited to kind of share with you in a very short amount of time what I've learned. My LinkedIn's up here. Feel free to connect. I'd love to hear your ideas and give you advice if it makes sense to. But I do understand that the only way for you to learn as an entrepreneur, the best way, is to get out there and fail. And you're going to fail as an entrepreneur. It's critical that you just take action. There's a lot of businesses that have great ideas that just stop and they never do anything. They're just paralyzed. You have to get out there and fail. It's going to happen, period. So let me show you a little bit. Let's see if I can navigate this thing. I can. This, don't laugh. This was me at 26 years old in my first entrepreneurial experience. So it's hard to believe how fast things go by. I had 2 buttons too many on a 4-button suit. I had a tie that was like as big as a tablecloth back then. And I really didn't know anything about business. I had just graduated from UC Davis. And I was an American Studies major. I went to UC Davis, not to American Studies isn't like the dream major that you, when you're a baby, you're like, yes. I went to Davis to play football and baseball. I wanted to go to the best school where I could play both sports. And if being a professional athlete didn't work out, then I wanted to join the CIA or FBI. So my best friend's dad, and Alexi knows him, he's still my best friend, he flew the presidential helicopter for 3 presidents, so I had to get in. I knew I was going that route. But, and what I was doing here in that video is I was doing a presentation for direct sales. And that company that I was with, which was called Equinox, grew to be the #1 fastest growing company on the Inc. 5000 list in 1996. And I was an entrepreneur in that company. I owned my own business. I was an independent rep, but I invested and I grew my own sales team in that business. Now, back then, 1996, when the fashion was a little weird, This was before smartphones. This was before the dot-com boom and bust, and it was actually also before bottled water was popular. There was like only Evian back then. And I was selling water filtration and natural products. So before there was Whole Foods. Actually great product lines, really forward-thinking, but direct sales was hard because you have to build your own sales team. The reason I got involved at all, because I was going to CIA or FBI, is because my college roommate and baseball teammate, who graduated a year before me, at 23 years old made $250,000 his first year. So being money motivated when you're young, and being in college and eating Frito sandwiches because you have no money and it tastes like a BLT, because there's nothing else to eat. Money motivated, I jumped into the business. So what else did I want to say about that? Make sure I covered it all. So I thought I was doing good, and you kind of saw a little bit. This is me again at 26 years old. To match my big tie, and I had 1,000 people in my sales organization, and at our height we were doing $1 million a month in sales, and I could make 3% on that, 3% on that a month. At 25 years old, thought I was doing great, right? So I got a big car payment to match the big tie, and it's the opposite of running a lean business. So, but you're young, and you think it's going to go on forever, and the company ended up shutting down abruptly. And everything I had spent 2 years building, all the people I was with, I didn't control the company, I was an independent rep. We lost everything in a really quick manner. So that wasn't fun. And obviously you don't want to have an accurate NSX payment back then and not have an income. So, but fortunately I saved a little bit of money, and I learned a lot from that first failure. And you're going to fail. Now that business wasn't just me failing, I brought friends into that. It's direct sales. I brought friends into that. I brought family into that. Believe me, I heard a lot about that. So I really, though, being that entrepreneur, American Studies major, never planned to go into entrepreneurship. I was exposed to being an entrepreneur, and it opened up a new world of possibility to me. It opened up freedom. I could see that that if I was good enough, I could create my own income and my own future. And in that business, I was introduced to really epic books like Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you haven't seen those books, you should definitely read them. They're classics. And then I learned a lot about just cash flow and marketing and sales and leadership. But I jumped in, and I made mistakes. And the first one was a failure. So here's what's happened since, and I'll explain this to you. My goal in this presentation, and you'll see this, is I'm really focused on early stage companies. I love taking ideas and turning them into money makers and having them make an impact. I've run businesses, as you'll see, one went from 0 to 3.2 billion in 4 years. And we had hundreds of employees, but that wasn't as fun to me as starting it and taking it and creating it. So after that company, the direct sales company, I started my own staffing company that went on for 19 years. Now this is 1997, so that it's before your time. Some of you weren't even born yet. But the dot-com boom was like something that was amazing. Everything was changing so rapidly. The internet was here. There was tons of possibility. And I started a staffing company. I love technology. Ever since I was young, I learned I was an electrical engineering major before American Studies. So I jumped in, I became a technical recruiter. I was working with Boeing and Disney, and companies needed talent, so it was pretty easy. And I really knew how to use the new tools like Monsterboard before it was Monster.com. And I knew how to get a bunch of resumes on my computer and parse them on my PC and then be able to find keywords and people quick. So that business went on for 19 years. I did okay. I did probably even better than I was doing before, but it took a couple years and me living with my mom for a year to get back in that position. And so luckily for me, that business became a cash flow business for me and my family. My wife ended up running it when Alexia was a little bit older, and I went on to different things, but that business stayed in business for about 19 years, and it generated cash flow. So I'm sure a lot of you think it's real sexy to have a company that will IPO. It's also sexy to be able to have cash flow so that you can do other things, especially if it's residual and you don't have to touch that business very often. That's what that was for me. 6 Degrees Staffing led me to Hiring Link. I was very frustrated with the staffing industry because anybody could start a staffing company from their garage and say that they're the best recruiter in the world. And because they weren't very good, they made everybody else look bad. I got frustrated. And I wanted to automate the industry, so I started Hiring Link. So about 24, 25 years old, or a little bit older than that actually, I raised $1.8 million right in the middle of the dot-com boom. And I had angel investors, and we had a development company that we worked with, and I put my head down. And we worked to build a product to automate the staffing industry. And actually it was going to connect databases of talent together, and so that people could share databases. It was a social concept way too early. And that business did fine. It was acquired by a staffing company, but it still struggled to get the money back to the investors. And there's some lessons that I'm going to impart to you from all these things in a second. I'm not going to wrap it all up right now. After that business was sold, it took about a year, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. My VP of technology at that company was about 10 years older than me, one of the smartest guys I ever met in my life. I really admired the guy. Also turned out he was bipolar, so he became very hard to work with, and he didn't always take his medication, which is part of having the right partners. He became the CIO at a $700 million entertainment payroll company. When you see the credits on the movies, those people that are on the credits are all paid by a payroll company, not by Mandalay Pictures or Paramount. They don't do that. So he said, hey Bill, this $700 million company wants to diversify. The owners are risk takers and they'll invest. And we started ECG. I went in, I pitched the owners that they should take the entertainment business model corporate, and then the owners raised $70 million. They put me, this young, early 30s, late 20s, early 30s guy in front of the VCs who had vision, and they raised the money. And through $1 billion of organic growth and $2.2 billion of acquisitions, we had a $3.2 billion company in 4 years. Now, as I noted down here, I'm in bold, I'm an entrepreneur. In italics, I'm an intrapreneur, and I'm going to talk about that. These are companies that I started, I put my own capital into, I raised money for in bold. The ones that are in italics, I went to an existing company, and I innovated there. And so my deal with that company was, before anybody knew we were going to do $3 billion, is I was to get 2.5% of the gross profit. I didn't have any equity in the company, but I got 2.5% of the gross profit. So that's a good deal. If you watch Shark Tank, you'll see Kevin O'Leary talks about royalties a lot. Sometimes he doesn't talk about stock or equity or anything like that, because royalties and perpetual cash flow is often better than equity, because equity doesn't always turn out to be something. Matter of fact, very rarely is it a big win. So, any questions so far? Everybody with me? Seems like it. Okay, cool. And please feel free to ask. So that company ended up being broken up and sold for various reasons. The owners were a bit unscrupulous, and I didn't get paid everything that I should have, especially on the sale. And if I had to do it over again, I would have got paid quarterly and not annually on that. So I learned a lot there. In that same company, I started two businesses there. Another one was Your Source. That was to go to staffing companies and tell them, if you're placing temp labor, we'll handle the work comp, we'll fund the payroll, and then you just recruit the people. We did that. We went from 0 to 21 million within the same company in 14 months. After that, I took a years off after those companies were sold. 6 Degrees was still running, and I started Emergent. The competitor to the company that I started those previous two companies called me and said, we know what you did. We understand that was sold, it's not going anymore. Do you want to do it here? And that's a $10 billion company that also does entertainment payroll. They wanted to diversify. So I was able to take that same knowledge and do it again at another company, and a lot of the same clients too. So being an intrapreneur, which we're going to talk about a little bit more depth, allowed me to take innovation, these innovative ideas that I had. I didn't have to worry about funding the company. These are $10 billion and $700 million companies. They had money. I didn't have to worry about workers' compensation, which we were employing thousands of workers. I didn't really have to worry about risk. I just needed to put my head down for a percentage of the gross profit and then really focus on delivery. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, Emergent was awesome for me because when I was working inside of that $10 billion company, they said, look, you're now doing $23 million in revenue. We're doing $10 billion. What you're doing is basically a rounding error for us. Just take the business. So I was able to take the business, spin it outside of the company, and I started W Workforce with all the clients I generated at that company. I didn't know that was going to happen. It's just if you take action, good things will generally happen to you. So being an entrepreneur kind of allows you and weaves you into different stories and philosophies around being an entrepreneur. Now, that was before. So today, and we'll talk about why in a second, I'm now part of several companies. One is PeopleLoop, and PeopleLoop is the Uber of the staffing industry. Uber has freelance drivers. We have freelance recruiters around the world. We work with companies like Disney and ESPN and Capital One. Target Recruit is the first workforce management system built on the Salesforce.com platform. Being here this week was convenient because next week I'm at Dreamforce. We have a booth at Dreamforce and we're exhibiting. Workforce management is digital onboarding, time tracking, things like that. First on Salesforce, not a novel product, but Salesforce has 150,000 customers you can sell to, and if you're the first on the App Store for your Apple iPhone devices, then people who have iPhones are going to buy you, so it's a great opportunity. And then there's one that is totally different than everything else I've done called Evp Academy. I was around my daughter's volleyball games. You know, being an entrepreneur, I'd sit there all the time and go, how do we make this better? Derek Olson here, who's a coach at Berkeley, is a pro in the AVP as well. He plays on the Pro Tour. My daughter's coach came to me and said, hey, there's an opportunity with the Pro Beach Volleyball to grow the youth programs around the country. I was very passionate about that. I jumped in. So I don't run these things on a day-to-day basis. I start them, get them going, and then find people to run them for me. So a little bit, I was going to play a quick video about Emergent, just so you can see. Just to kind of show you, what this video will show you, it will show you the muscle that being an entrepreneur brings, all the assets that it brings. This is Emergent, where I started this company inside of a $10 billion company. It was, we can play that. Yeah, that's right.
Emergent's family of companies
So here's a
is
quick
one of the
commercial.
largest employers of contingent labor in the U.S., sending over 450,000 W-2s last year. Headquartered in Burbank, California, our team of experts are some of the most experienced payroll, legal, and operations professionals in the industry. Emergent delivers savings and security to clients through contingent workforce employment solutions that save money, reduce burdens, and mitigate risk. For free help and advice on your company's contingent workforce strategy, call Emergent today at 855-250-5000.
So that was our company. Now, the reason I showed you that video is because the company I was with owned the whole building, right? Those printers that they had to print paychecks probably cost about $400,000 each. They handled the work comp, they funded the payroll. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. So sometimes you can look creatively about your funding for your company and take it to an existing company and then benefit from that mode. Now, here's some early entrepreneurial lessons from all of that I learned that I wanted to impart to you. Later on, I'm going to get into specific examples of how we're raising money for those three companies that we looked at that I'm still in right now. One is, these are quotes that I heard along the way that stick with me, and I think about them almost every day. When I was just a random guy who was doing a sales training for that direct sales company said this, and I never forgot it. Whatever I'm afraid of, that is what I should be doing. And that is really part of being an early entrepreneur. You just, especially me, I mean, you guys are all here at UC Berkeley. I was at UC Davis, grade school, but I was an American Studies major and an athlete. I didn't know anything about business. You're all here, right? You're learning right now, hopefully doing too. But there's going to be a lot of things you're afraid of, and you just, as an entrepreneur, have to break through that, and it comes up all the time. I didn't want to fire friends of mine, for example, in some cases. I was nervous about taking in $1 million from an investor and then telling them it was going to go a certain way, and not really knowing if it was, right? Obviously, you have to be positive. That's part of what we're going to talk about. So whatever I'm afraid of, that is what I should be doing as an entrepreneur. You're going to face fear. It doesn't matter. You're here to provide value for your customers and your shareholders. It doesn't matter how afraid you are. You just got to push forward and make it happen. Dig your well before you're thirsty. This is a book I read a long time ago by a guy named Harvey McKay. He was an envelope salesman, which was very hard business because it was commoditized. So you're raising money and creating customers not only for your current business, but even more so, you're creating customers and getting investors for your businesses 2, 3, and 4 businesses from now. The people that invest in you later may not invest in you now. But if you tell them what you're going to do, you do it, and you tell them what you did, then the next time they're going to believe you more. So that being said, there was a quote at the athlete orientation that I was sitting next to Alexia in a class, and this one stuck with me, and because it's relevant to you guys, and it was said by a senior at Berkeley, I think it's important to state. And I just heard from Mackenzie that please introduce yourself to 5 people in this class. There's a lot more than 5 people in this class. I should have done this more. He said, when asked, what would you do differently as a senior at Berkeley? This is a football player, I don't remember his name, but he's a senior, he was at the athlete orientation, parents were asking him questions. What would you do differently that you didn't do? I wish I would have introduced myself to everyone I saw at UC Berkeley. Hi, how are you? What do you do? Why are you here? Because this network that you gain, and you guys are going to be so successful, and many of you are going to be in this business school, which is the best undergrad business school in the nation. Network now. Why wait? Why wait? Find out what people do, and then when you're asking people, who they are, what they do, see if you can help them. That's critical, right? It's not about you, it's about helping them. That is huge. Also, be impeccable with your word. There's a book by Don Miguel Ruiz called The Four Agreements. It's a great book. It came out in the late 90s. This is one of the agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Now, you're building a network, you're breaking through and you're talking to people and you're not afraid. The next thing you want to do is you always want to do what you say and under-promise and over-deliver. It's critical because you don't want to have to keep building a network over and over and over again. You don't want to be Jordan Belfort, right? It was a great movie, but obviously his reputation was tarnished, and I'm sure he's still doing well, but it was probably harder for him. And this one also came up for me. As a CEO of a business, and some of you might not want to be CEOs, you might want to be CIOs, but this is still going to ring true. Until I take responsibility for everything, I can't have anything. So if a customer calls and says, it doesn't work, you can't just call 3 levels deep in the organization and say, hey, handle it. Sometimes you have to pick up the phone as the founder and say, hey, it's my fault. What did we do? How can I fix it? Until I take responsibility for everything, I can't have anything. It's all going to roll up to you as an entrepreneur. It's a lot of responsibility, especially when you take in a lot of money. So that's important as well. This one I learned from baseball way before business, PMA, positive mental attitude. You have to have a positive mental attitude. Now, some of you might have a product that's so good, like my cousin did. She started a company called Foot Pedals. They're little high-heeled, they're little cushions for women's high-heeled shoes. It's a product so good that no matter how stressed she was, the product would still sell. And I work with business owners that they're killing their own company because they're so negative and domineering. And I'm not sure if it's ego or insecurity, but positive mental attitude. Right, we're here to help build our company, but also build up the people in it, and really help our customers too. So being positive is really critical. And when you meet someone that does most or all of this thing, then make sure that you make them your business partner, or at least your friend for life. Because it's really hard to find great people that will do most of those things all in one package. And not that they're not good people, maybe you just don't mesh with them in that way. So when you find people that you mesh with like that, make sure that you stick with those people forever, because it's hard to find good people like that. Especially if you want to start finding people to run these businesses or these projects that you're in. This was important for me, and I know we're being high theoretical here, but I just want to wrap this up for you and how I stay focused, and it affects me to this day. Has anybody read Good to Great, or you have read that? Good, it's a good book. The case studies in it are a little dated. It was about a 20-year study of companies that, some of the biggest companies in the US, and some of them haven't done well since 2001 when they wrote the book, but there's several principles that ring true, and this one for me kept me focused. It's the hedgehog concept. And there's an ancient Greek parable that says, the fox knows many things, is very clever, and tries to eat the hedgehog, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. It can roll up in a ball and has spikes and quills so that the fox can't eat it. That's more valuable than all the fox's cunning. And this parable is based around that, or this principle. And the principle revolves around 3 things. And if you can find this for you, and you stick with it, like you'll see I've done for me, then the long-term advantages are huge. What are you deeply passionate about? What drives your economic engine, and what can you be the best in the world at? And the best in the world is the key thing there. It's not like being kind of mediocre. If you're going to be the best in the world at something, then sometimes you really got to narrow your niche. This is what it was for me. This evolved over time. This is where I'm at today in all those businesses that I talked about. Number 1, or let's say what you're deeply passionate about. I'm deeply passionate about transforming ideas into profits and a positive impact. I really love that. I love creating and not consuming. It's fun, it's exciting. It's also very hard. Going clockwise, what drove my economic engine? Well, I wanted to be involved, this is very technical, but I understood this. I want to be involved with businesses that I can get a share in the percentage of payroll. If I place somebody as a recruiter, I get 15 to 30% of their salary. If I put a temp worker on at an assignment, then I can get anywhere from 10 to 20% of their salary. I like temp better because temporary is residual and ongoing, and you can do less work, because we're all lazy to some degree. Then, what could I be the best in the world at? I knew, because I felt like I was understanding technology well enough, that I could be the best at introducing new technology and innovation to the HR industry. Now, I'm still working at that. I mean, the battle for me right now, and I'm so excited for you all because, you know, from AI to Internet of Things to whatever, you know, biotech, there's so much opportunity in the world. I'm just trying to stay healthy so I can be around when all this happens before the singularity does. So, introducing new technology and innovation to the HR industry, being passionate about new ideas, and opportunities where you get a share in the percentage of payroll were key. Also, which may benefit you, find a market that is fast growing and huge. So the staffing industry, which I was in, just after I started, was a $78 billion industry. The predictions were that it would go to be over $100 billion. Now it's at $147 billion. And the gig economy and gig workers and temp workers is a huge trend. So I'm really glad I'm in a position that I understand all these businesses and I can spot what might be next, because this is just going to keep growing. I did not know this. I did not know that the HR tech industry was going to be one of the sexiest industries to invest in 2014-15, and it's tapered off a little bit because Zenefits kind of messed everything up with they just didn't have good management there, but they had a good idea, cloud solutions in front of insurance. So these two mega trends made it a lot easier. I don't have to be great. And here's an example of that, right? If you're riding a big wave, you're still spending as much time as riding a small wave. It's the same amount of time. It's riskier to some degree. Often it's other people's risk because they believe in you, and you might be risking your own money. This is smoother, easier, but there's a lot more people. So you might want to consider looking at big industries and just ride the wave. Because if you can balance, you're going to move a lot faster. You didn't do anything different. I mean, there's different muscles, there's different risk, but ultimately it's the same amount of time. Think about that. So, at these companies, I use the hedgehog concept. Innovative HR, ideas to impact percentage of payroll, that's what I do. With one exception, volleyball, because I love sports and I want to be around sports and I wasn't going to let that one pass me by. All right? Entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur at an existing company. Most companies believe, so let's say that you found your hedgehog, whatever it might be, all right? Like you're going to find your software hedgehog. Now you're focused on becoming the best in the world at it. Well, you can start today reaching out on LinkedIn to find people that need your expertise. You might be the best person at AI, artificial intelligence for dry cleaners. I don't know, it's going to make something up in the Berkeley area or whatever. Let's say artificial intelligence, to think a little bit bigger than this. Let's think artificial intelligence for human resources software that screens individuals within the healthcare space. It's a very focused vertical. Right now, if you learn everything there is about that, and I'm going to show you at the end of the presentation how somebody with a junior high education got a hold of Tim Draper recently and got his attention, using that kind of niche. If you become an expert in those things over time, if you stick with it, and it's a big wave, you're going to be in a good position. And right now, you can get the attention of investors and CEOs because you know more than other people on it. Most companies are looking to innovate, and many are not capable or even thinking about it. You can take your innovative idea to a company today that has capital, and you may not get equity, which we talk about here next. You may not get equity, you might get a percentage of revenue or profit, and you might get a salary, but you're definitely going to get experience. So think about that as being an entrepreneur as a less risky. Was that a question? Okay. Any questions? We all good so far? All right. And then your yeses, but... and it's less risky, so they'll handle a lot of the corporate functions and allow you time for sales, innovation, and delivery, being an entrepreneur. And it's an option versus entrepreneurial funding. So, something to consider. Here's the potential challenges of being an entrepreneur. When I do presentations, I like to do them in movie format where the villain kind of is in the middle and looks like he's going to win. So, here's the potential challenges of entrepreneurship. Not that it matters to you at this point, but you're going to have less time with your family. You're going to have a responsibility to investors, be impeccable with your word. You're going to have a responsibility to customers and employees. You're going to have less time with friends. And as networked as you are now, when you're focused, it's like, man, your friends are the people that you work with. And if you could find balance around that, great. For me, I would have been a lot more successful, but I made a strategic decision that I wanted to be the coach of every one of Alexia's sports teams. So I was there. I didn't care. I didn't care if we had a meeting in New York. I had to be out. I'm not missing it, because now, it's wide open. That was my feeling. You're going to have less time for fitness and less time for your diet. You're going to be lots of travel, lots of stress. You're going to have less sleep. You might be like Mark Cuban when he was at broadcast.com, who said, I'm going to bed at 3 and I'm waking up at 6. I know that's what I did, because I wanted to do the 10,000 hour rule quick. I wanted to learn everything about these industries as quick as possible and get ahead of everybody else. I didn't want to take investors' money and not know what I was doing. I didn't want to bring customers on and have them call me and go, dude, it sucks. So I worked really hard. You could fail and people could blame you. That's part of it. Just be ready for it. All right, let's now, I think we have 10 more minutes before questions?
Yeah.
All right, I'll knock this out. Okay, those are the lessons I learned. A lot of it's theoretical. What I mentioned about the character side of things, whatever you're afraid of, that's what you should be doing. All those things matter, and they matter right now. Networking today, like if you don't know 5 people in this room, you're missing it. I was the same way. I didn't get it. Fortunately, I had football and baseball teams that I could lean on and go, hey, I know a lot of people. All you people here want to be entrepreneurs. Get together and do something, right? Take advantage of it right now. Don't let it pass you by. Let's talk about, because what you guys probably want to know a lot about is fundraising. How do you get money for your venture? And how do you start something? So let's talk about when I start a new business or when I look at a new business, what kind of materials and social and marketing proof that I need to get involved, whether I start it or not. So you're going to need a pitch deck, obviously, right? It should be 8 to 10 slides. We're going to take a look at one for the AVP in a second. I like to focus on things that are different. I don't want to do something like everybody else, because then it just becomes pure sales. I want people to come to me. I want it to be different. You need detailed financials. Now, when I first wrote those financials and I raised that money early on, I had financials, but I didn't really have a marketing plan. And by a marketing plan, I mean conversion rates. I drilled down into conversion rates, how we're going to take a list of customers. B2B, it's a small list. B2C, it's a wide list. And then how we're going to distill that down to conversion rates so I know that we can actually get customers. If we can't get customers, I'm going to have a hard time going to investors for the money. If we can get customers, no brainer. Let's go. So the rest of it's just operations. We'll figure that stuff out. You'll need marketing collateral. I like to, when I start a business, start a standard operating procedure document day one. Because what happens is all these good ideas get discussed every day, and then they're gone in an instant. And we can't remember. You're a lot smarter than I am, but then you can't remember what was said and what was done. You can't remember the good process versus the bad process. Standard operating procedures constantly improve that Google Doc is what I use for this stuff. You need a proof of concept. This is what I need to raise funds for me. So what's a proof of concept? A case study. That means you have a customer. It's a letter of intent. If you don't have customers, like when I raised $1.8 million for that company, I went to Smart & Final, Northwestern Mutual. These are people from my staffing company that I knew. And I asked them, if I build this, can you write me a letter that says we will buy it at that price? And then I took that to investors, and then we had to build the software. So letter of intent. Wireframes, if you're going to build software or whatever it is, wireframes for your product are a good way to show proof of concept. Plus, it helps crystallize your ideas, and it's actually fun to do. If you have a tech alpha or beta, it's one of the reasons I like the Salesforce platform, because you can configure without spending a lot of money on writing code. That helps. But ultimately, if you have revenues and customers, that's what investors want to see. And your valuation, whether it's seed or Series A, friends and families, like, you could be a carnival barker, basically, it's whatever valuation you set. But it's really going to be dependent on how many customers you have and your recurring revenue, and you're going to have better multiples. Then you're going to need a list of investors and related companies. So these are the things that I need before I go out and start raising money. Let's talk about conversion rates. When you write your financials, for me, I'm not going to go through basic financials. You guys probably can go online and see all that stuff, gross profit and net profit, the corporate expenses, what have you. I like to understand the market very in depth for me. I like to know, here's the different lists in the market that I'm going to contact, and here's what they're going to convert at, and here's the number of prospects we're going to have, and eventually on down to customers. I have a hard time raising money unless I prosecute, as a friend of mine was the head of digital at Home Depot, that's his term. He said, you gotta really prosecute these numbers so that you believe that you can get the customers. Because if you believe you can get the customers and it's scientific, you're not gonna have a problem raising money. It's your duty to go out and raise money for a business that's gonna grow, and if you don't get there first, somebody else will. Standard operating procedures. So the standard operating procedures for PeopleLoop over time have become a 221-page document. It just started with one. Everybody has access to it. Somebody's responsible for sales. Somebody's responsible for marketing, sales, operations, implementation. So make sure you start a document and there's no formula. Just start hacking away and keep all your good ideas and your notes there every day. And then you have huddles on that, right? 10-minute huddles with your startup. And then maybe at the end of the week on Friday, right before you go out and leave for the week or whatever, you're probably going to be working over the weekend, you kind of recap it. Here's PeopleLoop. So this is me at the startup conference in 2016. We were, this is a pitch competition in Redwood City with about 150 companies. You have to stand up in front of 2,000 people in the audience, and then they vote on their cell phones whether you're going to continue or not. We got second in that with PeopleLoop, and I had customer logos, which we had. I had the mobile. I had a Yelp type rating in the system. I had the market size. This is just my first slide. So we had pitch deck, detailed financials, collateral, standard operating procedures, proof of concept, but mainly revenue and customers is what was so interesting. A lot of the ideas on the stage didn't have that. That was huge. Target Recruit. This year, I'm helping Target Recruit raise money. This is at Salesforce's Trailhead Dream Pitch competition. We were one of 3 finalists out of, I don't know how many things came in. So this system, Reena Gupta, the founder of the company, had been running the company since 2008. There's a niche that she's not serving that is wide open. I went to her and said, hey, I want to take responsibility for this niche, start a business around it. She dedicated people to it. I'm a shareholder in the business, plus a percentage of revenue. I already have all these customers because I spent this hedgehog, right? I started reaching out a long time ago, and we have a list. So we had all those things before we raised. Now, with the AVP, this is a fun one, right? Derek will tell you, because he's a pro beach volleyball player. So what we're doing there is we're growing the game of beach volleyball at the youth level. It's the untapped market for beach volleyball. It's the fastest growing sport in the history of the NCAA. It's one of the most popular Olympic sports, but it's unorganized. So working with the owner of that business, I'll show you, this is a pitch deck from that. You have your standard cover page. It's nice to have logos, entrepreneurs, their logos. You talk about the size of the market and the opportunity, what the challenges are in the industry. If you can have this as an entrepreneur, you might have some assets that would be valuable to people. How this stacks up to golf, tennis, and swimming from a youth level. And then you have your wireframes, because we're raising money to do this. And then you have the team, including, this is our team, which we are an external team to the AVP. And the exec team's here. We have permission. They've funded the whole thing so far, and they'll probably continue to fund it. But we have the ability to now go out and raise for that technology. And that's kind of a look at the pitch deck. So, you can do it. I told you about, I tell you about junior high school educated person. That's Rohan Gupta. It's the son of Reena, who you saw in the picture 2 slides ago, the founder of Target Recruit. When we were at that dream pitch competition, he went up to one of the VCs in the crowd and he said, how can I help you? He's in 9th grade. He went up and said, how can I help you? What do you need? And so they had a conversation. He said, well, why don't you do something for me on cryptocurrency? Write me something. He wrote it for the VC. The VC never responded to him. He sent it to Tim Draper. Tim Draper responded. Said, this is brilliant. He wrote this little dissertation on this because it's a cutting edge, bleeding edge. And Tim Draper brought him in. Tim Draper's having his school come to the Draper offices to basically educate the school. And he just did it all based upon networking, right? He's got his hedgehog to some degree. He's in front with cryptocurrency. Not a lot of people know about that. He took action and talked to Tim, reached out to Tim Draper, and Tim Draper now is kind of taking him under his wing for this little project. So you can do it. If he can do it as a 9th grader, and we all know that youth goes a long way in Silicon Valley. We are all really young. So you can do it too. So It's a lot of info in a short amount of time. Love to field any questions if you have them. Yes, sir.
How did your first company fail like after 19 years?
Oh, it didn't fail. So what happened, first of all, anything that goes for 19 years isn't a failure. That was almost 19, she's not a failure. Jury's not out here. So when I went to start hiring Link, I handed the company off to my wife. She got the company, she was working 20 hours a week, she got the company to 1.5 million in revenue from our home office. She kept running it all the way through the downturn. When we hit the downturn in 2008, it was harder for her to kind of get reinvigorated about it, but the business kept going for another 6 years, just kind of based upon the customer base we had. Then there was nobody to run it. Really, to be honest with you, I've got other things to do, and with higher margins and bigger scale, so we just let it go. Yes?
What made you want to get into the staffing industry?
My mom was in HR, so there's no other reason for that. She was a VP of HR at a stock brokerage company. She talked about it a lot. I was coming off direct sales, and it seemed like a good idea. But what's really cool about running 6 Degrees was it's kind of like a lawyer. You kind of meet so many different people. In the dot-com era, I was meeting CIOs and CEOs and really smart people, and that kind of got me fired up about it. But initially, I didn't have a hedgehog concept then. I developed that after I read the book like 4 years in, and I liked the industry at that point. Plus, I was kind of in it. But I'll tell you that I don't like it as much as sports. So finally, when I got the chance to be involved with sports, 20 years later, I'm in. So I'll now figure out and regroup on how to make this thing work so that I can spend more time there. It took me too long. I should have done a hedgehog for that a lot sooner and just stuck with it. But when you have a kid and responsibility and you bring investors in, it's not that easy. Other questions? Yes?
When you find people to, you show your vision and then you find people to do the job for you, how do you repeatedly check in to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do?
Well, early on, first of all, I'm going to go back to that slide with if you can find people that have all or most of these things and work with them as your partner. So over the years, I make sure that if I meet amazing people like that, that I do my best to keep in touch with them so that maybe later on we can work together, but most of all just be their friend for starters, right? So what you do initially is, in my case, I'm in my hedgehog, I launch an idea. Let's just talk about PeopleLoop. So PeopleLoop, I knew that we wanted to start an Uber-esque type of community for recruiters, right? This crowdsourcing of all jobs is, whether it's TaskRabbit or Uber or anything else, is like it's really popular. And I knew we could do it in recruiting. And I knew I could outprice the competition in recruiting because these independent recruiters who are moonlighting for us or working part-time, I could pay them less than somebody I paid a salary for, ultimately. So I got a call from Tesla. And Tesla said basically, we liked what you did when you were at Emergent because you had a good solution. We didn't use you then. Basically, what do you have now? We have a talent shortage problem. I didn't have a name for PeopleLoop. I just knew that in the news that day, Elon Musk was talking about the Hyperloop and there were people involved and I like domains less than 10 letters. So I picked a name. I didn't have the name on the first call. I had a client that was interested in using us. I said, we're building a network of recruiters. We could find people for you faster. Because of X, Y, and Z, and then we started PeopleLoop. Once we started PeopleLoop, then we kind of set up, I was in it for like a full year. I was writing the standard operating procedures. I was bringing people into the business. I was reaching out to recruiters in the field. Some of those people made good partners. We brought them into the business. I vested some of the people in the business, 1 to 3% over a 4-year vesting period. So that way if it didn't work out, I could shorten it with like 6 months before they actually got something to see if it would work out. And we went for it, but it was started with customers. Then I stayed in it, and we brought somebody else in to help run that business. Yes, sir?
What are the most useful resources you use to learn about the industries? Like you mentioned that 10,000 hour rule, when you're going into an industry you don't know much about, like what are the sources you would recommend us to use? Is it databases? Is it the books that you read? Is it experience you got from working with people from those industries?
Yeah. Well, I embedded myself in the internet to learn everything I could every single day about. There's so much resources. The problem with the internet these days is that there's too much information. So you got to be a good filter. Maybe find a micro niche would be the best start, right? So if you're going to go Bitcoin, that's a broad subject now, but Bitcoin for a specific vertical, you might focus on that. So make the right decision about picking a niche. Don't go too broad because you're going to waste all this time. Find a really specific niche. I know cryptocurrency is a big thing, but that's what Rohan did here, for example. So once you have that, then, I mean, I don't know what to tell you beyond, well, number one, here's what I would do. I would then go on LinkedIn and I'd do a search for the keywords in that niche. I would find the biggest players in the business that know that niche right now, and I would reach out to them on LinkedIn, and I would say, I'm at Berkeley, I'm in the Haas Business School, or I'm just at Berkeley, as whatever. I'm interested in this vertical, I'm dedicating myself to it, can I talk to you about it? I would talk to as many people that are already experts as possible. Then you're at a vantage point. Take everything they tell you and consolidate the information into one document, do your own research, and then publish that. Or send it to CEOs of companies that might fund it, right? So go learn from people who already have the knowledge. They're not connecting generally, and use that first, and then the internet, of course.
Okay.
Yes?
So when this person wrote this thing about like cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
did he have an idea or was he just kind of summarizing what was going on?
He's a smart ninth grader. So basically the VC said, please, I want to know more about cryptocurrency. And the document he wrote is pretty thorough. Actually, from what I heard from his mom, who was at this meeting, said that they said that it was probably more advanced than a lot of the experts they have on staff there. But mainly because it's so new. He just did the research on the internet and pulled the document together. So, but that's often, we think that we have to be so smart and so educated to do something, but even the basics sometimes will get you in the door. But obviously it goes without saying that it's a good document, otherwise it wouldn't have gotten the door. But he is in ninth grade.
How do you know which niches will have potential, say, 10, 20 years from now?
Well, there's a lot of big ones right now, right? So we got blockchain, Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, platforms. That's just tech. I mean, people in this room might not even like tech. I think beach volleyball is going to be big because it's a lifetime sport. So you have to, let's go back to the hedgehog concept. You have to take, if you fail to plan, you become part of somebody else's. But when you narrow your focus down to what you're passionate at, what you can be the best in the world at, and how you can make money with it, what drives your economic engine, you'll start to accumulate knowledge around that. But you do have to shed things that you think might not be a good, I didn't know that HR tech was going to be so big, I got lucky. Sometimes you get on a wave and it's just bigger, and sometimes they barrel out on you. But you're young and you just gotta, you can't sit and wait for it to be perfect, you just gotta get out there and start doing it, right? But find your hedgehog concept and build on that. And then start to collect all the experts in the industry, and you be that expert. You be the hub for, why should somebody else be the hub for this new information? You do it. That's what Rohan's doing, at the highest level. Other questions?
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
The blockchain technology is super hot right now. Could you tell us in a few words what it is? Like, I tried to read about it, I don't really get what it's all about. Like, I know it connects all parts of internet in one place and nothing gets lost
Yeah.
somehow like that. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So somebody came to me 2 weeks ago and they said a couple keywords that I was interested in. Recruiting, which is my niche. Artificial intelligence for Facebook. So I was like, all right, that's all I need to know. So let's talk about Facebook, artificial intelligence, and recruiting, because I guarantee you that there's a large staffing company out there that's going to be interested in that. So blockchains, from what I know, and this is very high level and I'm certainly not an expert, is basically being able to encrypt documents and have people work on them simultaneously and not be able to break the chain. All the documents are stored locally, and it's not like somebody can make a change without every other version becoming invalid if somebody tries to screw with it, right? Brilliant for staffing, because now if you have a temp labor contract, you can put blockchain in, and procurement, HR, the contractor, and the staffing company can now all share the same document. It's stored locally. So what's more important about what you said isn't necessarily all the details about it, right? Because you can go on LinkedIn and you can find those people. What's more important is that you own that niche if you like it and it's a good market for you and it's going to be a positive one. You know, blockchain, Bitcoin, all that kind of stuff, they're still in question. But all I know is that somebody said artificial intelligence on Facebook for recruiting, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk. So I want to know about that. Get ahead of it, right? You can find the experts. Henry Ford was on trial basically in the 1910s, and basically they said to him, you're not smart. You know, why should you be running this big company? He said, why should I know all this stuff when I can push a button and have three of the world's experts in my office in 10 minutes, right? You don't need to know everything. You do need to know the people that do and aggregate that information.
Thank you so much. If you have any more questions, please